minute later, some doctor came in and did the eye check and asked me who I was and the same kind of questions. And again, I was fumbling through, so I got a CAT scan right away. And lo and behold, I have a concussion. And like you folks, I was young once. I was your age once. And I remember playing football and getting hit a lot harder and walking away and taking a few Advil. The doctor, a PA by the name of Ivy Murphy, beautiful looking blonde lady, comes in and tells my wife and myself that on Wednesday, I'm probably not going to feel too good. And my wife says, really? And then Dr. Murphy looks at me and says, no, you're going to feel like shit. So I've given you some real powerful medicine. You need to take it appropriately. And I told Dr. Murphy, it's okay, my bride's a trauma nurse. She knows how to do this stuff. So I got home. It was 8 hours there after they checked and released me. I got home. I'm a little tired. My wife gives me half of a pill that she picked up at the pharmacy, and I slept all night long. Didn't feel a pain. She got up to leave for work at 5 a.m. She got up at 4:30, left at 5:15. When she left at 5:15, she gave me 2 pills. And Wednesday, I woke up at 2:30 in the afternoon, kind of groggy, and my son steps in and gives me 2 more pills, and then I wake up Wednesday night about 9:30, and it's time to go to bed again. And she gives me 2 more pills, and I sleep all day Thursday, and Thursday afternoon I wake up and one of my dogs is licking my mouth. Like a French kiss by a Chihuahua, man. And thank God those 2 days went by like that, because even on Friday when I got up, I felt like somebody beat the shit out of me. And I can't believe an ounce of water did that to me. An ounce of water, after all the stuff I've been through. So that's why I went. I did the TED Talk yesterday. It went well. I felt like it didn't feel good. They wanted to have 2 weeks off of work, but like you, we have stuff to do, so I couldn't take 2 weeks off. If I'm going to hurt, I'm going to hurt at home or hurt at work, right? So it's better living through ibuprofen while I'm here. When I go home, it's Norco. We left our conversation on talking on drugs and drug trafficking. We want to examine this a little bit tonight. And I think it's a really important topic and very important now in lieu of what's going on. Drug trafficking accounts for the majority of all the money that the cartels are getting. And they have passenger jets, 737s, 707s that they purchased, and they'll fly tons in. They also carry it in ultralight planes. I just took some kids to the border from Westwood a couple weeks ago, and we were on the border patrol cruise, and we saw an ultralight flying right across the border at 10 o'clock in the morning. And it had a small kid in it. They train kids as young as 8 or 9 years old to fly those things because they can carry more dope. They fly to the U.S. side of the border, drop the load, and fly back. And believe it or not, we've had some deaths of ultralight pilots crashing. We even saw a captured catapult, a medieval catapult, where they would catapult bales of marijuana over. And if you go to sports events and they give you t-shirts, you know those little air guns that shoot t-shirts out to you? They use that to shoot wads of dope over. Also, they'll use people to bring dope over, and tunnels. So for the purposes of the quiz, drugs are smuggled into America through the air, through the ground, trucks and people, underground tunnels, and the ocean. There are 4 ways drugs are smuggled into America right now. We need to know that as we discuss this. We'll give you some examples. Right now, this is in Colombia. They have semi-submersible submarines. They cost about $1 million a piece to make. And they run, when they're full, with just the conning tower sticking out. And planes flying over can't pick them up. And they're made out of fiberglass, so they don't ping well on sonar. And they'll carry tons of dope. It's very hot inside. It can get as hot as 160 degrees in those things while they're driving. 3 guys usually take the load over, and they get paid quite well. They're on the road or on the sea for about 7 to 10 days, and they'll get anywhere from $10,000 to $15,000 for that load to bring across dope. Here's a guy who never had any college, did not graduate high school, and his design of this hull was so sophisticated that it is now used by the U.S. Navy to design some of our submarine hulls because it was ultra quiet. And this guy is not a maritime nautical engineer, right? Has a range of 2,000 miles. He built it by hand with fiberglass. And these folks are very, very ingenious. 1 load of dope will pay for that boat 10 times over. 1 load of dope. Here's what you see in the ocean. Let me raise the volume up.
When drug enforcement officials finally caught up with it, Bigfoot was loaded with more than 4 tons of pure cocaine.
Submarines are the present thing in vogue. I would tell my colleagues that we needed to buy a sub, because all our work was land-oriented. It made sense to me that subs were the way to go, because you don't see them.
Agents say the drugs are loaded into the front of the tightly packed submarines. The vessels carry only 2 or 3 crew members who aren't able to stand up in the submarine close quarters.
So you eat, sleep, poop in there, right? Now, the major precursor drug for methamphetamine, that is a central nervous system stimulant. It's the same classification as cocaine. The main drug, the precursor drug, is ephedrine. That's the same substance that you get in Sudafed, decongestant. Right now, they're a chemical company in China got in with Walmart. And right there where you see Lázaro Cárdenas in the bottom, right there in the state of Sinaloa, is the deepest ocean port in the world. There's literally no bottom to it. You know, as you come closer to the coast, the seabed rises. This one does not. And this chemical company that produces ephedrine got with Walmart. They paid $18 million, and they bring most of the ephedrine in the world goes right to that particular port. Right to that particular port. And as we looked and remembered in the readings, the Mexicans can manufacture up to 400 pounds of methamphetamine every 24 hours. Every 24 hours, and they cannot keep up with the methamphetamine appetite of America right now. It is a sort of Walmart version of cocaine. And don't forget, Mexico is a transshipment country. All the cocaine comes from South America, either by land or by air or by maritime or by foot, correct? No tunnels in South America to get into Mexico that we know of yet. And that cocaine is distributed to this 7 or 8 major cartels operating and then trafficked and brought up to Northern California. As of 3 weeks ago, the Colombian military discovered a submarine that's totally submersible. It can dive to about 50 feet of water. In 1983, the Colombian cartels at the peak tried to purchase a Russian nuclear submarine when the West was starting to go under the country, under the financial crisis it had, and they started selling military surplus. And the question that was asked, do you want with or without missiles? And the cartels wanted without missiles because they wanted to transport cocaine into Europe. So submarines is one of the big things we're seeing right now. That's what it looks like inside. And want to see a Mexican submarine race? There it is. It's all underwater. Got you, didn't it? So, I think people will say we're in a drug war, correct? Look what the country of Canada did.
The wood spider is the most accomplished of all web-building species. Recently, scientists gave these tiny creatures a variety of psychoactive drugs to observe their effects on web building. When given a minute dose of LSD, the spider's web took on an unfamiliar, minimalist structure. When given caffeine, the web structure was not affected, but the spider's behavior was. Given THC, the active ingredient in marijuana, the spider didn't build a web. One day, watched the caffeine spider. When given alcohol, the spider built a web, found a mate, and raised over 100 young. Screening them, and now the spider can't go within 100 centimeters of the web. The crack cocaine spider figured building webs was for suckers. Waited until the caffeine spider was exhausted, then came up behind it and popped a cap in its ass. Spider. When winter came, The marijuana spider had no place to live. It ended up in the crack web as the crack spider's bitch. Information on the crack spider's bitch, contact the Canadian Wildlife Service in Ottawa.
Not bad for a public service announcement, isn't it? Not too bad at all.
Clearly, going back to high school for me, we were not going to be able to lock up 80 million Americans for having tried illegal drugs.
If the DEA decided to crack down on all pot smokers and forced everyone to take a piss test, enforcing this law would require building prison walls around almost every city in America.
I just see such a corollary between the war on drugs and prohibition of alcohol. We tried the prohibition of alcohol, and I don't think anybody in this country wants to return to that. And yet alcohol is unbelievably destructive for a small percentage of people who imbibe.
Prohibition was an attempt by ideologues, similar to the ideologues that we have today, to impose their moral values on the rest of the country. And what they discovered was that it creates crime waves.
My name is T. Rogers. I am the CEO of Sidewalk University and the founder of SELF, Survival Education for Life and Family. I also helped start the Bloods on the West Coast.
No camera time. Blood used to be my brother. He said, Vietnam War.
Being a drug dealer doesn't mean that you are a gang member, and being a gang member doesn't mean that you're a drug dealer. But the war on drugs in itself, in essence, it gives you the power to sell drugs in a particular neighborhood.
Drugs come from poverty, which inspires crime, which inspires a loss of confidence, a loss of pride.
Instead of war on poverty, you got a war on drugs, so the police can bother you.
The administration had a war on poverty, and that seemed to dissipate. It seemed to disappear at all. I mean, it was gone. And then all of a sudden, up popped this thing called war on drugs.
After getting out of the mental hospital, my brother was moved to a halfway house deep in the ghetto. Here Kurt was introduced to crack cocaine. The people running the halfway house drove Kurt to the pawn shop where he pawned his guitars for $2,000 in trade for $100 worth of crack. I was always told that crack was a black man's drug, but now my own brother was hooked.
Drug prohibition for cocaine was basically passed in order to protect white women from black males. And
He's a
history
judge
document this.
in Orange County, retired.
Talking to people in the ghetto, one dealer's name always came up when talking about crack's popularity. Freeway Ricky Ross became known as the Walmart of crack. Ricky's story has become as legendary as Tony Montana and Scarface, but with an even more bizarre twist. Ricky, who is currently serving time in the Texarkana Federal Prison, is scheduled for release in 2013. The prison denied me access to the camera, so I started interviewing Ricky over the prison payphone.
When we discuss this war on drugs, we have to look at the consumption here. Two things. If you remember the prohibition of alcohol, a group of gangsters that we know as Babyface Nelson, right, Al Capone, all those groups rose, and they were fighting over illegal distribution of alcohol. In fact, if you look in the history, the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, where 14 people were killed from a rival gang, was all over somebody infringing, selling alcohol, illegal alcohol in another gang's church. And the headlines did not say alcohol-related death. When the prohibition was released, the argument against it was that we're going to have a country full of drunks because alcohol would be legal. In reality, what happened is, for the first time in the history of the United States, we actually determined the number of people who drank alcohol. And the number of alcoholics turned out to be smaller, a very small percentage. That very same argument is being used today by folks who want to legalize cocaine, marijuana, and heroin and methamphetamine in this country. There is a growing number of law enforcement officials and politicians, some 15,000 strong. You can find out about their views on LEAP, Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. I think it's www.leap.org if you want to go further. But they're using the same argument, saying that these drugs are causing the rise of these gangs, and the violence, and the cartels. And if we decriminalize them, not make them legal, decriminalize the possession of small amounts and the use of small amounts, we could decrease the number of people in American jails by 27 to 30%. You could raise $17 billion in taxes alone in the state of California, and you would see a decrease in violence. And their arguments logically are compelling. And then they'll cite to you that 6 countries in the world have done exactly that. And in those 6 countries in the world that have done that, smaller countries albeit, violence has gone down. The average age of drug use has increased. I mean, kids are a lot older before they try it, and the number of kids that do try it are a lot smaller. Overdoses have been almost non-existent. Now, I was in Rotterdam, Holland in 1972 when they legalized marijuana there. Now, people thought we were going to have a bunch of loadies in Holland, and all kinds of scare tactics come out. They tell you there's people on the ground in Holland, that the social services are over. If you and I were in Holland, we could go to a restaurant right now and buy up to 30 grams of marijuana. They actually have menus. There's like 10 or 15 different varieties you can buy. Right there, and smoke it inside the restaurant with a beer. And then go down a half a block away to McDonald's because you have the munchies, right? They have small aluminum shacks in public parks with policemen patrolling outside them. And if you're a heroin addict, you can go to free places to get free clean needles. You go in the little shacks, you put your spoon up, you heat your shit up, melt it, and you inject it in the privacy of the shack with a policeman walking outside. And people are afraid that Holland is the drug capital of the world. Now, if you go there now, you'll find that the streets are clean, that there are no addicts on the ground in the streets. You'll find that people are very amiable, and you'll find life much like it is here in Irvine. But there's one thing in Holland that Irvine does not have. Prostitution is legal there. So, if prostitution is legal there and you load it on dope, people like to have sex. And they do have problems with sexually transmitted diseases. In fact, there's some experts that say that Holland is the AIDS capital of the world right now, HIV capital of the world, because some of the addicts don't use clean needles and they transmit that disease. So the argument I'm going to present to you tonight is, do we legalize or do we decriminalize drugs here in America? Because if we do, potentially some of you could be working in government distribution stores, and your sons or daughters who are 18 years old can come and buy those drugs and use them. My baby, Pepperoni, turned 21 today. I remember when he was a little child. I had lunch with him today, and I told him, you know what, in my mind, you're still my little kid I used to hold in the arm. You're my Pepperoni. And now you're a man, you can go buy booze, and you're going to go this weekend with 4 or 5 buddies to San Diego to go party. And I hope you make the right decisions, choices, and consequences. Be responsible, but I know what's going to happen. You're going to get freaking stone-ass drunk, right? You're going to puke on yourself, probably pee on yourself, and you're going to wake up with a hangover and swear to God you'll never do this again until the next time. Right? It's sort of a rite of passage in this country for Americans to get drunk on their 21st birthday. Number 4 son got drunk on his 21st birthday. His older brother took him to Las Vegas for 3 days. And he comes back, and he's not feeling too good, so we take him to his favorite restaurant, Outback. And I buy him a mixed drink. And he takes a sniff of it and starts dry heaving. Oh, no, son, have another one. You're 21. This is life. Right? You didn't even eat his dinner. Well, let me ask you something. If you take alcohol, and that's a legal drug, alcohol is a legal drug. How many of us know people or read headlines where people have died from alcohol overdoses. Alcohol works on both parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous systems. It causes you to stop breathing, your breathing slows down, it causes your heart to stop pumping blood, and you will die with an alcohol overdose. Now, in America, how many of us know of anybody dying from an overdose of marijuana? What happens when you OD on marijuana? How do you know? You're right, you fall asleep. Your ass falls asleep. It does not work on the nervous system that controls your heart rate or breathing. You fall asleep and you wake up what? Hungry. But alcohol is a legal drug responsible for a lot of deaths, a lot of accidents, and a lot of injuries. It's a legal drug. So my question becomes to you, here we're in live dilemma. Here's our challenge. If you were running the country right now, would you legalize or decriminalize the possession of small amounts of marijuana? Because right now up in Monterey County, in Northern California, a sheriff used to issue out a card to people to carry up to 3 pounds of marijuana or 8 plants for personal use. In Mendocino County, I said Monterey, Mendocino County. Marijuana is the most popular drug in the country. So what do we do? Because as a cop in 1979, my first felony arrest was some poor bastard who had a joint. And he went to state prison for 3 years for a joint. Which I thought was wrong. And now what happens? You can have up to an ounce and you get a ticket, like to run a red light, right? So what do we do? If you were running the country, how do we deal with this drug war that started in 1971? I'm going to bypass some of these videos, right? With President Nixon. We need to know the drug war began with President Nixon in 1971. And he started against public enemy number 1, marijuana. That's what he started. Marijuana is a class or Schedule I drug. We need to know that for the quiz next week. Marijuana is a Schedule I drug by the federal government. Schedule I means it's highly addictive and it causes death. And there's absolutely no medicinal values to marijuana. And I find this kind of curious between you and me. There is a medical doctor who has his PhD, MD in Israel that's been studying marijuana for like 25 years. What's the active ingredient in marijuana? When I have pain and I take Norco, I take 200 milligrams of Tylenol and hydroquinone. It is a medicinal dosage. I'm allowed to take 1 tablet every 4 hours for pain. Correct? If I don't want to take that drug because it might influence the way I drive or talk or walk, I take 800 milligrams of ibuprofen. That's 4 Advil tablets, a medicinal dosage. When you smoke marijuana on the street, do you get a medicinal dosage? No. You don't know how much THC you're getting, correct? Because THC content today can be anywhere from 14% to 23% THC. When I was buying the marijuana in the 80s, it was 3% THC. So it's a lot more powerful today, right? This doctor in Israel extracts the THC and measures out medicinal dosages and gives it to patients. And he's seen massive improvements with psychological disorders and physical disorders by giving medicinal dosages of marijuana. And the American government refuses to recognize over 100 peer-evaluated papers that he's published in Europe for this drug. And if, by chance, you get permission from the federal government to study marijuana, you have to buy marijuana from U.S. federally grown pot farms. And they're not up to date with the current technology because the marijuana you buy from them still is 3 to 4% THC. So the argument becomes is how can you be an effective researcher if you're not working with the stuff that's out in the public today? So that's the question I raised to you. And then the crack cocaine. Freeway Ricky Ross. Write that down. Freeway Ricky Ross was a black gang member and probably the best business person in the history of the United States. Cocaine was popular, but cocaine was only available to people like white-collar professionals. It was $100 a gram. And only white-collar professionals can buy it. It was $200 a gram when I started buying it. And you couldn't afford it. People in the low-income areas could not afford it. Freeway Ricky Ross figured out a way to convert cocaine. When you buy it in the street, cocaine is water-soluble. It's called cocaine hydrochloride. Write that down. Cocaine that you buy in the street is water-soluble. That's why you can put it in your inhale it. It goes to your mucous membranes. The liquid in your mucous membrane dissolves the powder. It is slowly absorbed in your system. If you snort marijuana, unlike you see in TV when they go, oh, good shit right away, it takes about 10 minutes for it to get in your body that way. And since it's water soluble, you can get into your body a different way, a better way, where you get an instant high. You can dissolve it in a little bit of water and draw that cocaine solution up in a syringe. And cocaine is part of the lidocaine topical anesthetic family. And you can inject it, and you can get an instant high because it's instantly in your bloodstream. And cocaine is also a vasoconstrictor, which means it can constrict blood vessels a little bit. You were chasing a guy once, and he had an ounce of cocaine, and he didn't look, and he ran into a pickup, a tow truck. And he cut the top part of his scalp off. When he was running, the top part of his scalp was flipping in the wind like this, right? And I started making a wisecrack like going, woo, like that. Then we watched him take the bag of cocaine and put it on his bleeding skull and put the flap over. And he's running like this, feeling no pain, and the bleeding slowing down. First aid. Right? So you can inject cocaine because it's water soluble. Crack cocaine is easy to make. What's your name? First name? Huh? Alex. Alex and I want to make crack cocaine. We're going to be in the crack cocaine business at UCI. Alex and I will buy $1,000 worth of cocaine. We'll buy 1 ounce of cocaine. And then we'll send, what's your first name? Tahir. And we'll send Tahir over here to Albertsons. We'll have him buy 3 ounces of baking soda. 1 ounce of cocaine, 3 ounces of baking soda. Correct? Who's my next victim? We pick a girl this time. What's your name? Janet. Janet? Then we'll go over to Janet's house and ask her for a little mixing bowl. And Alex and I will put the 1 ounce of cocaine with the 3 ounces of baking soda that Tahir bought, and we'll mix it up. And say, for instance, we wanted purple crack, because we think the color purple. So we'll get some grape soda that Janet has. And we'll add a little bit of grape soda, and we'll mix it up so like we have a paper mache. Remember that paste you make, the glue with the flour glue? And we'll mix it to just like that. We're mad scientists, aren't we? And then we'll get some aluminum pie tins that we bought at Albertsons, 3 for $1.99, and we spread that out like a little paste, and we simply put it over the stove at Janet's house and let it cook and evaporate the liquid away. And what's left is something that looks like a thick, off-white colored cracker. That's crack cocaine. You've just changed it from a water-soluble form to a non-water-soluble form that only can be what? Smoked. And you crack that up and you sell the little tiny pieces they call rocks for $3 to $5 a piece. Our $1,000 investment plus $3 here for the baking soda plus 99 cents for the grape soda, we make 5 or 6 pie pans full, and we can generate $20,000 selling crack cocaine. When you take regular cocaine, you get high. Say, for instance, you snort it or you inject it. The high goes up kind of slow, and then it peaks out. If you inject it, it peaks out within about 10 or 15 minutes. If you snort it, it's about 35, 40 minutes before it peaks out. And then you're high for about a half an hour, feeling really good and alert. And when you come down off of cocaine hydrochloride, the water-soluble, it's a slow ride down. Slow ride down. When you take crack cocaine, it's like having an orgasm. When you smoke it, the high is instant. It lasts for about 10 minutes, and then you drop down below where you started. So if you felt kind of okay, after you take your hit of crack cocaine and you're done with it, you feel like shit. So you want to take what again? Crack cocaine again, because it's only $5 a pop, and you have a 20, so you can get 4 rocks. And you smoke crack cocaine all day long. It's like having 20 orgasms a day. No, I don't know about you, but that could be a potentially good thing, correct? It's so cheap, Freeway Ricky Ross figured this out. He was making hundreds of pounds of cocaine with 300 or 400 pounds of baking soda in 5 or 6 houses, and he could not keep up with the appetite in the African American community and the low income community in Los Angeles. Because everybody was buying it for $3 to $5 a rock. Because it's cheap. And you had instant addicts. Freeway Ricky Ross made millions of dollars selling crack cocaine. Now here's the killer. Today we've uncovered evidence that the CIA was involved in this mess. The CIA was working the Colombian drug cartels in South America at the time, the Big Four. Somehow, nobody knows how, this street gangster from Los Angeles, Freeway Ricky Ross, mysteriously, magically hooks up with a guy that works for the Colombian cartels in America. Don't know how that happened. All we know is that that guy he got hooked up with was a CIA informant. And that guy became Freeway Ricky Ross' supplier of cocaine. And Freeway Ricky Ross brought tons of cocaine into Southern California using the CIA informant, who was being watched by the CIA, spreading the crack cocaine throughout Southern California and eventually causing the crack cocaine wars in 1985. And we have a tape of the CIA director at the time acknowledging that that happened. But it also says we didn't know our informant was using all that money. Turns out that that money allegedly was used to fund U.S. aid in Central America during the war down there. So when people say it's all a gangster's fault, it's always Freeway Ricky's fault, I'm not sure you can blame him. He's going to get out of prison this year, at the end of the year. It's going to be interesting to see what his story really is. That's how we started crack cocaine. So the great true and false question for the quiz next week is, crack cocaine is water soluble, and the answer is what? False. Crack cocaine is not water soluble. Cocaine hydrochloride is water soluble, and you're going to get questions on that. The only way you can use crack is smoke it. Now comes methamphetamine. Methamphetamine high is just like a crack cocaine high. And that's why crack cocaine and methamphetamine are highly addictive drugs. And we have an American drug appetite for both these drugs right now.
X, O,
I don't want to look at it. Let me see.
every piece of documentation possible.
Talk about being in the wrong place at the wrong time. First-time dealer and former Crip, Leroy Chico Brown, was arrested with Rick. Chico walked into a DEA sting operation that was set up to capture and imprison Rick in trade for Rick's old partner, Danilo Blandone.
How could this be possible? We read through the documents, and then that's when Gary Webb started explaining it to us, and he was like, everything came together.
One of the most paramount moments, perhaps caused by Gary Webb's Dark Alliance, took place in November of 1996.
It was a monumental historic event. I mean, the director of the Central Intelligence Agency was coming to watch and face the people.
Listen to
Now,
this.
we all know that the U.S. government and the CIA supported the Contras in their efforts to overthrow the Sandinista government in Nicaragua in the middle 80s. Now, it is alleged the CIA also helped the Contras raise money for arms by introducing crack cocaine into California.
Deutsch felt he had to do something to try to deal with the outbreak that was foaming all over the country at the time. And of course, it just blew up in his face.
CIA fights drugs. CIA does not encourage drugs.
I mean, it was actually one of the most monumental blunders of all time, if you think about it.
We have no evidence of of a conspiracy by the CIA to engage in encouraging drug traffickers in Nicaragua or elsewhere in Latin America.
Deutsch was there because of the Gary Webb stories. The Gary Webb stories had sparked a national furor.
I would like to have Richard Ross's brother to speak, please.
The United States government turned their head and let this cocaine come into the United States of America. Allowed Gary Webb to have full access. This whole thing is orchestrated.
It was near pandemonium. It was about, I guess, 1,200 people standing remotely in the auditorium. 2,000 people outside listening on loudspeakers. And it was very hard to keep control. I got called on finally, and I said to her very clearly, I was looking right at Deutsch.
I am a former Los Angeles police narcotics detective, and I work in South Central Los Angeles, and I will tell you, Director Deutsch, that the agency has dealt drugs throughout this country for a long time.
I was able to name operations.
Director Deutsch, I will refer you to 3 specific agency operations known as Amadeus, Pegasus, and Watchtower. I have Watchtower documents heavily redacted by the agency. I was personally exposed to CIA operations and recruited by CIA personnel who attempted to recruit me in the late 70s to become involved in protecting agency drug operations in this country.
He stumbled and stammered and wrung his hands. I would have this and I would have that.
If you have information about CIA illegal activity in drugs, you should immediately bring that information to wherever you want. Let me suggest 3 places. The Los Angeles Police Department.
And of course my response was, I started there 18 years ago, sir, and they tried to kill me. Now what do you want me to do?
If this information turns up wrongdoing, we will bring the people to justice and make them accountable.
The crowd started chanting, we told you, we told you, we told you. And it was a great moment of unity.
Gary Webb wrote a book on these operations. It was published, and mysteriously, about 30 days later, he was killed. No, I'm not saying there's a conspiracy with the government, but historical facts are historical facts. You have an ex-LAP narcotics detective, and I really didn't believe this. But in my travels around the country to 46 of our 50 states to give lectures to law enforcement, I ran into a good friend of mine named Hunter Glass, who's retired Special Forces guy in the Army. He lives in Fayetteville, North Carolina. He's a great friend of mine. He's also crazy because at 58 years old, he fathered a child for his wife, a little girl. And I don't know about you, but raising a little girl at 58 years old is going to be tough because by the time she's 18, how old is Hunter going to be? Which his nickname is Gator. He sent me a picture. He was bathing his daughter last week, and she was asking for the dog, her pet dog. And he is at the restroom door, doesn't leave her, but calling for the dog. And the dog doesn't come, and the dog doesn't come. And now he's frustrated because the girl keeps on saying, I want my doggy. And so Hunter turns around, and she starts laughing. And behind the shower curtain was the dog inside the bathtub. And he sent me a picture of it. He pulled the shower curtain, and there's the dog, like he got me. I said, get ready, man, because she's only, what, 2 years old now? Imagine what she's going to do to you when she's 18. He was in Guatemala, working with the Sandinistas, training them. And he personally tells me that he helped other soldiers load cocaine on U.S. transport military aircraft. And he was told that we're taking the cocaine to America to be destroyed. And he asked why, because we have the diesel and gas here, we can destroy here, and he was told to shut the F up. And he worked for 4 or 5 months loading cocaine on Air Force transport planes that went to America. Coincidentally, the same time where these allegations came. Now, I'm going to tell you, this drug business is all about one thing. It's not about conspiracy or breaking the law, it's all about this. Because when you're dealing with these illegal businesses, this buys you instant power, instant control. Because as we already know, everybody has a price. Agreed? Everybody has a price. So when we look at these
Put
things,
out $1 million
listen to the
in
judge.
cash. How much corruption can you buy at any level for that $1 million? And the answer has to be quite a bit.
On December 10th, 2004, investigative journalist Gary Webb was found shot in his apartment.
You're lying.
No.
When?
Saturday.
Oh, man.
The internet was set ablaze with conspiracies of a CIA assassination plot, but overwhelming evidence of a suicide soon put the theories to rest.
Well, he would tell me that he would come home at night and the guys, you know, climbing up the pole late at night, 12 or 1 o'clock, at nighttime, and people following him around everywhere he goes. He had cars telling him, and his phone was tapped. He was just saying that they were kind of like giving him the blues. You know, a lot of things were going on that he didn't really like. And he said it was the government, too.
So what do we do with evidence like this? Because I invite you to read his book. It's very eye-opening experience when he talked about the drug war. I was going to show you.
85% of all people in the United States of America today that use any form of illicit drug use only marijuana. That means that the total numbers of everybody else that uses any other drug would not justify this colossal prison industrial complex, this colossal bureaucracy that we have to fight the war on drugs.
We are not going to arrest basically the backbone, the fabric of America today. You got 80 million Americans who have tried or used marijuana. We're talking about doctors, lawyers, judges, scientists, entrepreneurs, athletes. We're talking about the backbone of America, the marrow of America that does smoke or has smoked marijuana.
Marijuana is Schedule 1. Do you think marijuana belongs in Schedule 1?
I'm not sure how he thinks that is, to be honest with you.
What about countries like Amsterdam, where they have not so much legalized, but they've decriminalized, and they claim that it's helped crime and that it's helped addiction?
Amsterdam, when I've been there, you have to cross over bodies lying on the street because they're high on drugs. They're just lying on the corner. You have to jump over them when you want to go somewhere.
Less than a week after baking in the sun at Sheriff Joe's tent city, I decided to take a quick trip to see if he was being 100% honest about the effects of Dutch drug laws on the streets of Amsterdam. When I arrived, I was joined by a friend of a friend who had grown up in Amsterdam and knew the streets like the back of his hand. Yes, we did see drug dealers, but they were extremely polite and always backed away after realizing I was not looking for drugs. And unlike Sheriff Joe, who was crossing over bodies, we ended up having to pay a dealer to introduce us to a single enthusiastic crack smoker.
It was crack, man. It was crack in Amsterdam. Crack.
What do you think about the fact that you can do this on the streets here without being taken?
Because we pay tax for use.
Yeah. What do you think about it? Like, what do you think about American drug laws as compared to these drug laws?
They are very harsh in America.
Yeah.
You can't even smoke a joint of marijuana.
Yeah, no.
You get into problems, you know. Here, you get a coffee shop, that's why I don't understand why you can legalize this shit, you know.
Well, what do you think about the fact that in America, like, they're filling up the prisons with people that just want to do drugs?
It's not right. They gotta, you try another different approach, like taking care of the people who are addicted. They give them places to use the shit, and taking care of people who don't have a house to sleep. That's the way they do it here in Holland.
By total coincidence, we found ourselves at the 420 bar on April 20th. Unbeknownst to me, 420 is a very significant date in the worldwide pot smoking community.
My name is Michael Bailey. I'm the owner of this bar and coffee shop, which means that you can drink a beer in here and you can also buy a bag of grass, if you so wish. I've had this place for 18 years, and I've never had a fight in here.
American comedian Tom Rhodes moved to Holland where he became the Dutch equivalent of David Letterman.
drugs are legal there, it's not true. And actually, marijuana and hash is not legal, it's tolerated, as are mushrooms. So all organic drugs are tolerated.
I don't have much to say about Dutch drug policy. Their model applied to the United States would be inappropriate. We're not going to do it. We're not going to legalize drugs. Drugs are already decriminalized by and large in the United States.
What have they done in Holland? Well, they realize, of course, that the drugs are here to stay, and let's try to manage the problem. And they put in a really effective harm reduction program.
You know, in Holland, they call people junkies who do anything too much. If you drink too much, you're considered a junkie. If you smoke too much weed, you're considered a junkie. Which, when I first moved over there and I heard people go, oh, he's a junkie, I always thought they were talking about heroin.
What has happened? Well, the Minister of Health of Holland held a press conference a few years ago saying, you know something? We have only half the marijuana usage in Holland as you do in your country, both for adults and for teenagers. He said, we have succeeded in Holland in making pot boring.
Holland has 60% of the drug use is out of the United States, and that's among kids and adults, and that's for marijuana and harder drugs.
If you do weed and it leads to coke and then you do heroin, that's really the individual's own psycho problem.
In Amsterdam, people addicted to heroin need not resort to stealing or prostitution. The Rainbow is a free clinic that allows junkies to come in off the street for a fix of government-controlled heroin in a clean syringe.
Heroin addicts are pitied, and the government does the best they can to try and get them off heroin. Like, last year in the papers, Dutch doctors said that they think they should be treating heroin addicts with heroin instead of methadone and morphine because they think that just makes the addicts addicted to those things.
Methadone withdrawal is like 5 times as long as heroin withdrawal. I guess also the point of methadone is to, like, you know, get yourself out of the hole.
I don't support that all drugs should be legal. You know, I don't think heroin should be illegal. I think it ruins people's lives.
What you saw the person doing is called jacking the fix-off. The syringe was full of heroin. You draw back on the plunger to draw some blood, and then you push the plunger forward just a little bit, and you draw back some more blood, and you push it forward the plunger a little bit. You go back and forth about 5 or 6 times, or quickly like you saw this gentleman do, or this user do. And once the color of the heroin in the syringe changes to red, that's when you slam. That's what they call slamming. People who use heroin tell me it is like an orgasm that lasts for about 30 minutes. People who use heroin will get something called somnambulance. You know how you're in lecture and it's been a long day and you're kind of tired and you're kind of nodding off. I was at a 2 o'clock meeting this afternoon, and at about 10 minutes to 3, I was like, nodding off. I was still listening, but I was nodding off. They call that somnambulance. People who use heroin who will fall asleep can still hear you and respond, but they will be, the physical appearance will be sleeping. The first time you use heroin, about 90% of the people will puke because it causes you to become really nauseated and you puke. But the high is so intense and so lasts so long that you want to do it again. The problem with heroin, cocaine, and methamphetamine, write this down, is they're highly addictive. Your body builds a tolerance up to those drugs very quickly. Heroin, methamphetamine, cocaine, highly addictive. Your body builds up a tolerance very quickly. And the users, in an effort to get the same high they got the very first time, use more and more of the drug, thinking that more quantity will cause them to get that high, and they never reach the high that they get on the first time. And the addictive process happens very, very quickly. So let me ask you something. How many of you had some type of caffeine product today? Coffee, tea, 5-hour energy drink? Diet Coke? How many of you drink Diet Coke in the morning? That's caffeine. Isn't that a drug? In fact, you can buy Tylenol with 50 milligrams of caffeine, and they call it extra strength, migraine strength Tylenol, because it has caffeine in it. And that's a legal drug, correct? and we drink it. The judge, James Gray, I'm trying to get him here. His schedule might clear up. He is a retired Orange County Superior Court judge. He's a colleague of mine, and he, when he retired, wants to decriminalize cocaine, marijuana, and heroin. Because he was tired of sentencing the same people over and over to 30 days in jail for drug abuse. He calls it harm reduction. He belongs to LEAP. He's a very intelligent man. He's a law and order man. And if I can get him to come here, his arguments are quite compelling and logical. But I'm like you. Most of us sit on the fence. Sometimes I think this is a good idea. Quite often I don't think it is a good idea. And more often than not, I don't know what the hell the answer is. Because we do have a problem. We have less than 5% of the world's population in this country. As a nation, we consume over half the world's illegal drugs. And you have to admit that the current policies, are they working? It's easy to get drugs on campus here. You can get ecstasy and marijuana here in 5 minutes if you know the right people on this campus. And then we go to the pub and drink beer and listen to those stand-up comedians and laugh our asses off because we have a legal drug aboard, alcohol. And then some of us stagger back to our apartments, or some of us drive under the influence. How many of you, and you don't have to raise your hand, how many of you really have driven under the influence of alcohol? Yeah, a large number. A large number. I have. We all have. And by the grace of God, we haven't gotten a crash and killed somebody or hurt ourselves. Correct? But how many times do we read that seniors in high school get killed or kill a friend in a drunk driving accident? And there's a big outrage about teenage drinking. Right? Now, the drug war is now worldwide. Write this down. The drug war is now worldwide, and the U.S. has many allies in the drug war now, because it's a drug war. One of our allies is to the south, Mexico, where all the cartels are at. But they're not equipped to deal with the sophistication that the cartels have, because they have so much money. The cartels have better equipment, better communications equipment, better transportation equipment, better teachers than the Mexican military does. They hire mercenaries that train themselves. They have better weapons than some U.S. military forces do, because they have state-of-the-art and no budget. A kid that grew up with my son is an Air Force pilot, and they've cut down the training. He doesn't fly as much as he should now. He gets like 2 hours a month flight time when he should have 2 hours a week flight time, because gasoline and avgas is so high and budgets are being cut back. I have friends in the U.S. military, the Marine Corps, that are being asked to leave early because we need to cut down on our military experiences. And where do some of those guys go if everybody has a price? Because the cartels have no budget, they can do whatever the hell they want. When we are shrinking our military, shrinking our training programs, shrinking the amount of hardware we can supply our military, those groups are increasing. Increasing. And we have to have allies in the drug war. Mexico is an ally. Check this out. Dolby sound. Do you want it?
Apenas eran las 10:30 de la mañana,
10:30 in the morning,
cuando una balacera aterrorizó a decenas de personas.
running gun battle, right?
de carro a carro entre gatilleros y policías. Los delincuentes no pudieron huir y se refugiaron en el vecindario. La balacera era intermitente. En medio de ella había que desalojar a 40 niños de un kinder.
40 kids in the kindergarten come out, right? They're scared.
Los pequeños estaban aterrados, confundidos. Unos salían de la mano de los uniformados, otros en brazos y algunos como si ellos fueran los rehenes.
Look where her hands are at. Welcome to Tijuana. Because we're in a drug war, and who's the victims of the drug war? And this does not just happen in Mexico. It happens in other parts of the world as well. And because we live in a technology-wise society, kids going home from high school will go to scenes where police have had shootouts with drug cartel guys and take pictures during recess of the blood and guts as souvenirs. Because as my friend who retired from the U.S. Army, Colonel Dave Grossman, tells me, he believes that people get desensitized to violence. You can get it like inoculated to violence. And you look at the headlines that we have with our allies, and you find out that since 2006, over 60,000 people have died in the country of Mexico because of the drug war. 60,000. And it's not a single death, there are always multiple deaths. Always that carnage we look at. So, our federal government does some research. And DEA tells us something. That most of the drugs that are illegally consumed in this country come from what country? What's our ally to the south? You need to know that for the quiz. You better write that down. DEA research suggests that the majority of illegal drugs consumed by Americans come from Mexico. Although a small percentage does come from Canada, believe it or not. Canada leads the world in BC, what they call hydroponically grown cannabis. They call it BC cannabis. We'll look at that a little bit later. And the major distributors of the drugs in Mexico happen to be those cartels. But the cartels also employ street gangsters in Mexico. For the purposes of the quiz, Mexican cartels operate on both sides of the border. They operate in some 1,200 cities in America right now. So cartels don't have really a boundary. For the purposes of the quiz next Tuesday, we need to know that cartels can operate in small groups or large groups. They can operate in independent groups. The cartels work sometimes in groups called bajadores, or takedown crews. And it's 4 or 5 guys that will take a drug dealer down or a smuggler down. That's how sophisticated they are. HIDA stands for High Intensity Drug Trafficking Areas. There are 8 HIDA areas in the United States. We need to know for the purposes of the quiz that Southern California is in the Southwest HIDA region. That's the only thing I want you to know. Southwest HIDA region. That is California, Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas. And Oklahoma. We need to know that southwest portion is the 8th HIDA region. We're going to look at some data from HIDA right now. Our great country. 2006 data from HIDA suggests that cocaine use was used by 35% of Americans, methamphetamine 38% of all the drugs being used, marijuana only 11%, but it's still the most popular drug. So let's look at the reason why this. The purple graph is 3.9%, almost 4% pharmaceuticals. A lot of pharmaceutical drugs like hydrocodone, Oxycontin, all types of drugs can be purchased legally in Mexico without a prescription, are purchased by U.S. citizens, and then brought across the border and sold or used illegally. Here's what we want to know for the quiz. On the western half of the United States, write this down, western half of the U.S., the most popular stimulant is methamphetamine. On the western half of the U.S., the most popular stimulant is methamphetamine. On the eastern half of the United States, the most popular stimulant is cocaine. Now, you'll get asked a trick question Tuesday. The most popular drug in the country is what? Marijuana. The most popular stimulant on the West Coast is what? The most popular stimulant on the East Coast is what? Cocaine. You need to know that for the quiz. I'm going to throw some tricky questions at you. Major drug trafficking organizations. Those are the cartels. We'll look at how we work. This is from the FBI. Everybody thinks that only Mexican cartels operate in the U.S. Well, we have Asian organized crime and Asian cartels, so to speak, working in the U.S. And there is where we see their activities, along the eastern seaboard in the southern area and along the western portion of the U.S. Colombian cartels still operate in our country, although not at the size and quantity as they did back in the 70s and 80s. New York and Florida still seem to be the major areas where the Colombian cartels are. If you look where cocaine comes from, because of the maritime enforcement, Venezuela, ouch, Venezuela has now been with Hugo Chavez. They don't like the U.S., and so Venezuela has become sort of a transshipment country because they get a lot of money. But we still see cocaine in the Caribbean area, and then coming up through Central America and Mexico. We want to know for the purposes of the quiz is that cocaine comes from Central America through Central America, from South America through Central America and Mexico. That's one route. And then there's the Caribbean route, the sort of eastern route. So Colombian cartels, if you had to ask a true and false question, Colombian cartels operate in the U.S., the answer is what? True. Do Asian cartels operate in the U.S. for the purposes of this class? The answer is what? True. True. Right? In the western part of the country where methamphetamine is the most popular stimulant, we seem to see the highest concentration of Mexican cartels on the western part of the country. Although they operate throughout the United States, they do operate in the western part. If you look through Central America, there's 3 major trade routes through Central America. Right up the center of those countries and then along both coasts. Those are the trade routes. So if you're going to do interdiction or enforcement, those would be the areas that you want to concentrate on. Mexico, geographically, is a hard country. In the northern part of the country, our southern border is sort of like a high desert area. There's mountains on both the east coast and west coast. As you travel south through the country, it becomes more tropical in nature. As you get to the southernmost state, Chiapas, it is tropics. Because if you go to Honduras and Nicaragua, you abut the southernmost part of Mexico, and you come across that way. If you look at Mexican drug trafficking organizations, they operate in nearly every region in the country, but we see the most activity at what coast? The West Coast. You getting tired? Give me about 5 more minutes. I think I got about 5 minutes left, and then we'll get out here. Shoulder hurts really good right now. I need ibuprofen. And in about an hour, I need Norco. I did not know that Valium was given by neurologists for muscle spasms. I thought Valium was an anti-anxiety pill. But they gave me Valium because it helps with the soreness in the muscles. And when you take Valium at night when you go to sleep, you sleep really well. So I might have to take Valium tonight too, at home. Our southern borders, as we're well aware, are very porous. The U.S., back up, the California border with Mexico is only 7% of the border, and we got 25% amount of the drugs. So write that down. The California-Mexico border is only 7% of the total border length, and about a quarter of all the drugs come to that border. We need to know that. We also need to know this for the quiz. That Mexican drug trafficking organizations, or Mexican cartels, have emerged as the primary drug traffickers in almost every region of the country. And they use our street gangs to do the street work for them. So for the purposes of the quiz, Mexican drug cartels have become the primary drug traffickers. We need to know that for the quiz. We talked about this I-5 going up the I-5 corridor, or the Santa Ana Freeway. It goes from the southern border of Mexico up to Vancouver, Canada. And you can see how drugs come up from Mexico up the I-5, then they cross the 80, and they end up in the breadbasket area of the country, with states like Nebraska, South Dakota, North Dakota, Iowa, and Missouri. That's where drugs come up. On the central area from Texas, you take the I-35 freeway up. So the test question on the quiz is, the U.S. infrastructure, and infrastructure means roads, freeways, train routes, bus routes. The U.S. infrastructure aids in the distribution of drugs in the country, and the answer has to be what? Yes, true. You need to know what an infrastructure is, and when I say infrastructure in the quiz, it's referring to the roads, the railroads, the ability to travel, bus routes, all that kind of stuff.
The Arellano Felix drug cartel put together a marriage between ruthless Mexican mafia hitmen with street gang roots and Tijuana rich kids.
First, the union seemed to enhance the Tijuana drug cartel's drug dealing and killing efficiency. But Chris Blatchford reports there may be some strain on the marriage. Chris.
Well, in fact, it could be a divorce, as these billion-dollar drug lords fight for their narco bucks. We see in this Fox Undercover report that the bad guys appear to be killing each other.
Here on the streets of Tijuana, Southern California gang members are stopped and questioned. Their shirts pulled off and tattoos studied by the inquiring eye of Major Felipe Perez Cruz, who heads a special Mexican army unit that is looking for Tijuana cartel bosses, the feared Arellano Felix brothers, and the paid killers who work for them. One of those hired killers was David Barone, called El CH, who was branded with this La M tattoo marking his membership in the feared Mexican mafia prison gang. Barone recruited other hitmen from the ranks of his old neighborhood street gang in the Logan Heights area of San Diego. FBI agent Pete Ahern describes Barone as ruthless.
We're afraid of him. And rightfully so, because he was a stone cold killer.
Authorities say Barone's death squads wasted Catholic Cardinal Jesus Posadas Ocampo, a dozen top Mexican law enforcement officials, 2 of Major Perez's drug-fighting soldiers outside a Tijuana courthouse, and many, many more. Then Barone himself, last November, was shot down by his own crew during a hit on an anti-cartel newspaperman in Tijuana. Newsman Jesus Blancornelis survived the attack. His bodyguard was killed. Following that hit, Perez Cruz and his drug-fighting soldiers brought in suspect Alberto Gonzalez Ortega for questioning. Gonzalez was a narco junior, a term used to describe a group of young men from well-to-do Tijuana families who joined up with Barone and his gang members to deal drugs and kill for the Arellano Felix drug cartel. Gonzalez evaded the law in TJ, but just 3 weeks ago, his body was found dumped on the street in Providence, Rhode Island. He was shot once in the back of the head, execution style. In California, a week earlier, another narco junior, Guillermo Cornejo Garcia, was executed in broad daylight at a park in Chula Vista. Drug fighter Perez Cruz says the fact that 2 narco juniors from Tijuana were executed on American soil shows the long arm of the Arellano Felix cartel can reach anywhere. And several weeks before these 2 were killed in the U.S., narco junior Roberto Parellon Rosas was hit outside his residence in Tijuana, shot down gangland style. Mexican officials
believe all three of these narco juniors were also involved in the failed hit on newsman Blancornelis, where hitman Barone was killed instead. So who is killing the killers? Perez Cruz theorizes it could be Jose Alberto Marquez, also known as the Bat. Law enforcement sources tell Fox News Marquez is a Mexican mafia hitman who jumped parole in California last summer and headed to Mexico to help Barone deal drugs and do hits for the Tijuana cartel. Here at a Tijuana roadblock just several weeks ago, this Mexican army drug fighter who wants to remain anonymous told Fox News his unit is doing all they can to spot and capture the Bat. Bat and Barone, according to U.S. law enforcement intelligence obtained by Fox News, had plans to move an army of paroled Mexican mafia brothers to Tijuana and take over a bulk of the border drug trade. And Major Perez Cruz says Art Romo, another reputed Mexican mafia member, as recently as last December, was working as a go-between to recruit new narco juniors and gang members on both sides of the border. Romo, 6 years ago, was one of the leaders in a series of gang truce meetings here in Orange County. At the time, Romo insisted he was organizing rival gangs to stop drive-by shootings. However, law enforcement intelligence scoffed at the idea and uncovered plans by the Mexican mafia to cool gang rivalries, only to collect a tax on drug profits from every gang neighborhood. This former gang member attended some of the meetings.
The city area wants to control the whole building.
In the midst of the gang truce effort, Romo went to prison for 3 years on federal drug charges. He was released in 1995. Then, just last March, Romo was arrested again in Fountain Valley. This time, he was busted with 262 kilos of cocaine. Perez Cruz says no one could get that large a quantity of dope without direct connections to the Tijuana cartel bosses. Romo faces a...
There's 268 kilos of coke. It was my case. 268 keys, and Romo was buying his drugs at the time from the Arellano Felix organization. And the family is pretty much defunct now. The brothers that ran the organization are either dead or in custody, and the sisters are dead or in custody. And right now, the Sinaloa cartel, run by Chapo or Shorty Guzman, is trying to take over the Tijuana turf from the remaining lieutenants that are running that organization now. I showed you this video to prove to you that prison gangs, specifically the Mexican mafia, are transnational gangs, correct? And our prison gangs are helping dealing drugs. Make sense? Write that down because you'll need it for the quiz. And let's call it a night. Drive home safely.
2% left. Oh my God.